The massive vessel appeared on long-range sensors first, a shadow against the stars that shouldn't have been there. Senior analysts dismissed it as a glitch until 3 more monitoring stations confirmed the anomaly. Then panic rippled through Harmony Station's command center. Taiwan stood motionless at the great curved window of the observation deck. Around him, staff moved with nervous energy, their voices hushed as if the approaching ship might hear them. The vessel grew larger by the minute, angular, dark, bristling with what could only be weapon systems. "Ambassador, we've completed our preliminary scans," Jisoo said, appearing at his side. She handed him a data tablet, her fingers trembling slightly. "It's concerning." Taiwan studied the readings. The ship was nearly twice the size of the largest Concordat vessel. Its hull composition included materials unknown to their science division. Most alarming were the energy signatures, pulsing, powerful, and clearly designed for something other than peaceful exploration. "How did they approach without triggering the outer warning systems?" he asked. Jisoo shook her head. "Their propulsion technology masks their signature somehow. They were simply there." For 17 generations, the Galactic Concordat had maintained a delicate peace among its member species. They had built their alliance on principles of scientific cooperation and cultural exchange. Their ships were research vessels and diplomatic carriers. The concept of warships had faded into historical records. "Has it made any aggressive movements?" Taiwan asked. "No," answered Duwu, the station's security chief. "It's maintaining position just outside our defensive perimeter. Almost like." He hesitated, "like it's being careful not to frighten us." Taiwan straightened his formal robes. "Open communications." The main view screen flickered, static dancing across its surface before resolving into the image of a face. The being looked remarkably similar to several Concordat species, bipedal, symmetrical features, eyes forward-facing. Yet something about its bearing was different. The being wore a dark uniform with metal pins and colored strips that surely denoted rank or achievement. "This is Captain Hyun-Ki Park of the Terran spaceship Indomitable," the being stated, voice clear and strong. "We come seeking diplomatic relations with your civilization." A collective breath was drawn across the command deck. The being, the human, spoke a language their translation systems could process. This was not a completely alien encounter, then. Somewhere in the vast histories of the Concordat, there must be a connection. "I am Chief Ambassador Taiwan of the Galactic Concordat," he replied, keeping his voice steady. "We are a peaceful alliance of 17 spacefaring species. Your arrival is unexpected." The human captain nodded. "We understand our appearance may cause concern. We come with peaceful intentions, though our ship's nature might suggest otherwise." Taiwan chose his next words carefully. "What brings a warship of your size to peaceful Concordat space, Captain Park?" The human's expression changed subtly. Something dark passed across those alien eyes. Pain, perhaps, or memory. "Necessity, Ambassador. Earth, our homeworld, fought a war against an enemy that nearly destroyed us. We survived. We adapted. Now we seek allies before they return." The statement hung in the air. Taiwan heard murmurs behind him, saw staff exchanging worried glances. "You've encountered hostile alien life," Taiwan said. It wasn't a question. "We have," Park confirmed. "A species that views all others as resources to be harvested or eliminated. We barely repelled their first invasion. Our scientists believe they're regrouping for a second attempt." Minho, the station's historical expert, stepped forward. "Ambassador, in all our records, we've never encountered a species that survived first contact with a technologically superior aggressive force. The fact that these humans not only survived, but apparently drove back their attackers is unprecedented." The implications weren't lost on Taiwan. The Concordat had evolved through cooperation between species at similar development stages. They had never faced the scenario this human described. "Captain Park, we would like to extend an invitation for you and a small delegation to board Harmony Station for formal diplomatic discussions. Ta-1 said, "We have much to learn from each other." Park nodded. "We accept your invitation, Ambassador. I'll bring a team of 5 specialists. With your permission, the Indomitable will maintain its current position." After the communication ended, the command deck erupted in overlapping conversations. Tai-1 raised his hand for silence. "Prepare the diplomatic reception hall," he ordered, "and activate the historical archives. I want everything we have on species matching their physical description." "Ambassador," Jisoo said quietly, "their ship's weapon systems remain active. Should we be concerned?" Tai-1 considered this. A species that faced extinction would not easily lower its defenses, even in peace. We must understand their perspective if we hope to build trust. He turned back to the window, studying the dark shape of the Indomitable against the stars. These humans had survived what should have been the end of their civilization. They had fought and won against impossible odds. Now they carried that history with them, embedded in the very design of their ships, in the watchful eyes of their captain. "Everything changes now," he whispered to himself. The peaceful existence the Concordat had known was transforming before his eyes. Whether these humans brought war to their doorstep or helped them prepare for an inevitable conflict, the age of innocent exploration was ending. And somewhere out in the darkness beyond their sensors, an enemy waited, one that had nearly destroyed a civilization strong enough to build the Indomitable. Tai-1 shivered despite the controlled temperature of the observation deck. The humans had survived their first encounter with this enemy. Would the Concordat survive what was coming? The blue-white lights of the docking bay cast long shadows as the human shuttle settled onto the landing platform. Steam hissed from its cooling systems, momentarily obscuring the sleek craft. Tai-1 stood at the front of the welcoming party, surrounded by representatives from each Concordat species. Some had traveled for days to witness this historic first contact. When the shuttle door opened, Tai-1 was surprised by how ordinary the humans appeared. Their basic body structure wasn't far removed from several Concordat species, yet something about their movements set them apart. They stepped from the shuttle with fluid grace but unmistakable readiness, eyes constantly moving, bodies positioned to respond to threats that weren't there. Captain Park led his delegation of 5 across the docking bay. He wore a dark uniform similar to the one he'd worn during their first communication, though this one featured additional decorative elements that Tai-1 assumed indicated ceremonial dress. At his side walked a woman of similar height with short black hair and intense eyes. "Ambassador Tai-1," Park said with a slight bow of his head. "Thank you for your hospitality. May I introduce Commander Sunma, my second-in-command." The formal introductions proceeded smoothly. Besides Park and Sunma, the delegation included a science officer, a cultural specialist, a medical officer, and someone described as security liaison. This last individual stood slightly apart from the others, his posture more rigid, his gaze more calculating. As they walked through the curving corridors of Harmony Station, Tai-1 noticed how the humans observed everything. They didn't simply look, they assessed. Their eyes tracked movement patterns of station personnel, noted access points, studied structural details. It was subtle but unmistakable. "Your station is impressive," Commander Sunma said, running her hand along the smooth wall of the main corridor, "though your security protocols are minimal." Beside Tai-1, Security Chief Do-hyun stiffened. "The Concordat has known peace for generations," he replied, a defensive edge in his voice. Captain Park's expression softened slightly. "Peace is precious," he said, "but often more fragile than we realize." The diplomatic reception was held in the station's Grand Hall, a circular room with a transparent ceiling offering a spectacular view of the nearby nebula. Representatives from all 17 Concordat species mingled, their curiosity about the humans evident in their clustering around the visitors. Tai-1 observed from a distance. The humans handled themselves well in the unfamiliar social setting. They asked thoughtful questions about Concordat culture and answered queries about Earth with practiced diplomacy. Yet there was something unsettling about watching them. When offered food, they consumed items that would have been toxic to several Concordat species without hesitation. Their biology apparently allowed them to process substances that would kill others. Their laughter came easily when engaged in pleasant conversation, yet their eyes never fully relaxed, constantly sweeping the room. The cultural specialist, a woman named Yuma, spoke with a group of historians about Earth's development. "Our planet is a study in contradictions," she explained. "War and art, violence and compassion evolved side by side. Periods of terrible conflict gave birth to our greatest works of beauty. Our most destructive weapons were developed by the same minds that created our medical breakthroughs." "How did your species avoid self-destruction?" asked one historian. Yuma smiled. "We came close more than once. Perhaps what saved us was that same contradiction. Our capacity for both destruction and creation meant we always had voices arguing for preservation, for finding another way." Across the room, Taiwan noticed Captain Park in conversation with several Concordat scientists. The human captain was describing Earth's first contact with the enemy they called the Void Collective. "They came without warning," Park said. "3 ships appearing near our outer colony. We attempted communication for 6 days while they sat motionless. When they finally responded, it was with weapons fire. The colony, 30,000 people, was gone in hours." The scientists looked disturbed. "But you fought back," one said. "We had no choice," Park replied. "We adapted quickly, converted science vessels to military use, developed new technologies specifically to counter theirs, lost millions before we began to understand their patterns." Before Taiwan could hear more, Intelligence Officer Junho appeared at his side, face drawn with concern. "Ambassador, may I speak with you privately?" he asked. They moved to a quiet alcove away from the reception. Junho's voice was low, urgent. "We've detected communication blackouts in the outer systems. 3 monitoring stations went dark in the past 12 hours. The pattern matches exactly what the humans described from the early stages of their war." Taiwan's blood ran cold. Could it be equipment failure? "All 3 stations." Junho shook his head. "The probability is virtually 0. Taiwan glanced across the room at Captain Park. To his surprise, the human was already looking directly at him, as if sensing the conversation topic from across the noisy hall. Their eyes met, and Park gave a small, knowing nod. They had been expecting this. The humans believed this enemy followed them. Taiwan realized aloud. Or, Junho said grimly, they were already coming, and the humans just got here first. Taiwan excused himself from Junho and made his way across the reception hall. As he approached, Captain Park stepped away from his conversation. "You've detected something in your outer systems," Park said without preamble. It wasn't a question. "How did you know?" Taiwan asked. "Because it's the same way it started for us. Communication blackouts, sensor ghosts, unexplained energy readings." Park's voice remained calm, but his eyes had hardened. "Ambassador, my ship didn't come here by accident. Our long-range tracking suggested Void Collective scout ships were moving in this direction. We hoped to arrive in time to warn you." "Why didn't you tell us immediately?" Taiwan asked, fighting to keep accusation from his voice. "Would you have believed us?" Park asked simply. "A strange warship appears and immediately claims a deadly enemy is approaching. Or would you have suspected we were manufacturing a threat to manipulate you?" Taiwan had no answer. The human was right. "Ambassador," Park continued, "my people learned to fight because we had no choice. Your Concordat still has options, but only if you act quickly. We can help prepare your people for what's coming." Around them, the reception continued. Diplomats laughed and conversed, unaware of the shadows spreading across the outer systems. Taiwan looked at the assembled representatives of the peaceful Concordat and then back to the battle-hardened humans. "How much time do we have?" he asked. "Not enough," Park answered, "but more than we had. And sometimes, that makes all the difference. The great council chamber of Harmony Station hummed with tense voices. The circular room, designed to foster unity and calm deliberation, now echoed with fear and anger. At the center stood Tactical Officer Yunji, her dark uniform stark against the white marble floor. Her fingers moved through the holographic star map, expanding sections of Concordat space. "The evidence is clear," she said, her voice steady despite the hostility directed at her. "These disruption patterns match exactly what happened before our colonies fell. Red markers glowed across the outer systems, communication stations gone silent, distress signals abruptly cut off, sensor anomalies that appeared and vanished. These are the same indicators we observed before the Void Collective struck Earth's outer colonies," Yunji continued. "They send advanced scouts that disrupt communications before the main attack force arrives. They can demand whatever they wish after we've evacuated the survivors," Park replied. Then his tone softened slightly. "I understand their suspicion, Ambassador. In their position, I might feel the same. But the enemy doesn't care what we believe about them. They'll come regardless." Before Taiwan could respond, every communication device in the room activated simultaneously. A harsh sound filled the air, something between static and screeching metal. Both humans and Concordat personnel winced at the painful noise. Then it resolved into a voice, if it could be called that. The sound was flat, mechanical, each word pronounced with identical emphasis, devoid of any emotion or inflection. "We are the Void Collective. Your resistance is noted. Your extinction is inevitable." The message repeated once, then cut off, leaving a heavy silence. Park looked at Taiwan, something like grim satisfaction in his expression. "Now your council has heard directly from the enemy we invented." Outside, through the broken walls of the building, Taiwan could see the sun setting over the ruined colony. Rescue workers moved among collapsed structures, searching for survivors. The sky above was darkening, stars beginning to appear. Somewhere out there, the Void Collective was moving, calculating, preparing its next strike. The peaceful existence the Concordat had known for centuries had ended. The shadows that had nearly consumed Earth had found them. "What do we do now?" Taiwan asked quietly. "Now," said Park, "we prepare to fight." The emergency council chamber aboard Harmony Station bore little resemblance to its former dignified self. Gone were the ceremonial decorations and formal seating arrangements. Maps, tactical displays, and communication terminals now covered every surface. The 17 council representatives looked out of place in their traditional robes, surrounded by military personnel in practical uniforms. Captain Park stood before them, his posture rigid but his voice calm. The devastation at Quan Rim Colony had finally convinced even the most skeptical council members that the threat was real. Now they wanted answers and protection. "Your species have forgotten how to fight," Park told the hastily formed Defense Committee. "We haven't had that luxury." His words hung in the air, harsh but undeniable. Representative He Jun, once the loudest voice against the humans, sat silent now. He had led the first relief mission to Quan Rim. What he saw there had changed him. "We need to transform your vessels," Park continued. "Concordat ships are built for science and exploration. They lack basic defensive systems. We need to adapt what you have while constructing proper warships." "Warships," Representative Yijun repeated, the word sounding foreign in her mouth. "We built the Concordat to prevent war. Our founding charter explicitly forbids military buildups." Taiwan stepped forward. "And now we must preserve the Concordat by preparing for one," he countered. "Our charter also demands we protect our people." The debate continued for hours but ended with unprecedented unity. The Concordat would prepare for war. In the weeks that followed, Harmony Station transformed into a military command center. Human specialists from the Indomitable took on teaching roles, working day and night with Concordat volunteers. In Docking Bay 7, engineer Min Ho moved between 3 Concordat science vessels, directing modifications, Where delicate sensor arrays once extended, weapon mounts now protruded. Inside, research laboratories have been converted to ammunition storage and battle command centers. The power systems need reinforcement. Minho explained to a group of Concordat engineers. Your engines are remarkably efficient for normal operations, but they can't handle the energy surges from weapons fire. The Concordat engineers, once designers of peaceful exploration vessels, now absorbed military engineering principles with determined focus. What they lacked in experience, they made up for with intelligence and dedication. In the medical wing, human officer Su Jin demonstrated emergency field procedures to Concordat doctors. Her hands moved quickly, applying pressure bandages to a practice dummy. When you're treating battle injuries, you won't have time for perfect solutions, she explained. You prioritize. Stop bleeding. Maintain breathing. Prevent shock. Everything else comes later. For species who had developed sophisticated medical technologies that made traditional trauma care nearly obsolete, these basic techniques seemed primitive. Yet they watched and learned, understanding that sophisticated medical equipment might not be available in a battle zone. Throughout Harmony Station and across Concordat space, similar scenes played out. Combat training, emergency response drills, evacuation procedures, all skills the Peaceful Alliance had never needed suddenly became essential knowledge. Taiwan barely slept. He moved from council meetings to strategic planning sessions to diplomatic calls with outlying worlds. Many colonies wanted to evacuate. Others demanded more protection than could be provided. Some questioned whether surrender to the Void Collective might be preferable to war. We cannot negotiate with them, Taiwan explained repeatedly. The humans tried. The Void Collective views other species only as resources to be harvested or obstacles to be removed. 23 days after Quan Rim, the emergency alert sounded again. This time, it was Elysium Hub, a major trade center and home to over 3 million beings from across the Concordat. Unlike Quan Rim, Elysium had received defensive upgrades and early warning systems. They're testing our response, Captain Park said as the defense fleet assembled. Quan Rim was isolated. Elysium is connected to major trade routes. They want to see how we react to a larger threat. The Indomitable led the hastily assembled defense fleet, 60 modified Concordat vessels, alongside the massive human warship. Many of the Concordat captains had been peaceful explorers just weeks earlier. Now they'd followed the humans into battle, their crews a mix of volunteers and hastily trained civilians. From Harmony Station's command center, Taiwan and the Council watched the battle unfold. The Void Collective ships emerged from jump points in perfect formation, 15 vessels of varying sizes, their black hulls absorbing rather than reflecting light. The humans' battle tactics confused the Council members at first. Where the Void Collective moved with mathematical precision, the human-led defense seemed chaotic, almost random. Ships broke formation, executed unpredictable maneuvers, and sometimes appeared to retreat only to circle back and attack from unexpected angles. I don't understand their strategy, Representative Yi Jun said, watching with concern. That's the point, Taiwan replied, remembering his conversations with Park. The Void Collective thinks in patterns. They expect logical responses. The humans deliberately break patterns to confuse them. On the main screen, the Indomitable took a direct hit that would have destroyed any Concordat vessel. Energy rippled across its reinforced hull. Secondary explosions erupted along one side. Yet the massive ship continued fighting, wounded but operational. How is it still functioning? Bajun asked in amazement. Redundant systems, explained a human tactical officer. Multiple backups for every critical function. The ship is designed to keep fighting even when severely damaged. The battle lasted 11 hours. When it ended, the Void Collective had retreated, but at terrible cost. 17 Concordat ships destroyed, thousands dead or injured. Elysium Hub damaged but saved. The Indomitable limped back to Harmony Station, its hull scorched and breached in multiple sections. Captain Park had been severely injured when a command console exploded during the final engagement. His left arm was badly burned, the bone shattered. In the emergency medical bay, Tai-1 found him conscious but heavily medicated. Around them, medical teams worked frantically to save wounded from both humans and concordat species. The council representatives had come too, moving awkwardly among the injured, seeing firsthand the cost of the victory they had just witnessed. Their faces showed a new understanding. The theoretical threat had become brutally real. "You held them," Tai-1 said quietly to Park. The human captain nodded slightly, wincing with pain. "This time. But they'll be back with more ships." This was just a probing attack. Representative He-jun approached Park's bed hesitantly. The once skeptical counselor looked shaken. "Your people fought with remarkable courage," he said. "You've sacrificed much for worlds not your own." Park's eyes, though clouded with pain medication, remained sharp. "Not for worlds not our own," he corrected. "For worlds that now fight alongside us. There's a difference." Tai-1 looked around the medical bay, seeing humans treating concordat wounded and concordat doctors assisting injured humans. In the midst of horror, something new had emerged. An alliance not of convenience or diplomacy, but one forged in shared sacrifice. The Void Collective had returned as the humans warned, but they had found not just the humans waiting for them, but the beginning of a unified defense. The cost had been staggering, but a pattern had been broken. For the first time, the Void Collective had failed to destroy their target. It was just the beginning of a long war, but it was also something else. Proof that the enemy could be stopped. And in the determined faces of the council members, Tai-1 saw that the reality of their new universe had finally sunk in. The massive viewing window of Guardian Fleet headquarters framed the impressive sight below. Where once had been an uninhabited moon, now stood humanity's gift to the Concordat. A military training facility and shipyard unlike anything the Peaceful Alliance had previously considered necessary. Tai-1 watched silently as training exercises continued on the surface. Mixed crews of humans and various Concordat species moved through combat drills with growing coordination. 6 months had transformed awkward, hesitant scientists and diplomats into something resembling soldiers. "They're learning quickly," said a familiar voice. Tai-1 turned to see Captain Park approaching, his stride slightly uneven but purposeful. The captain's left arm gleamed in the starlight, a mechanical prosthetic replacing the limb lost in the battle for Elysium Hub. The human technology was now being adapted for injured Concordat species, one of many exchanges between the allies. "Your people have been good teachers," Tai-1 acknowledged, noting how the captain's eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, a habit all humans seem to share. "Though I still hope someday we can return to our peaceful ways." Park's expression softened slightly. "The best warriors are those who desire peace the most," he replied. "That's something my ancestors understood." 6 months of preparation had transformed the Concordat. New defensive systems protected major worlds. Early warning networks stretched across previously unmonitored regions of space. Shipyards that once produced science vessels now constructed warships based on human designs, but incorporating Concordat technology. More importantly, the 17 species had united with a common purpose. Old rivalries and political differences faded against the existential threat. The humans' presence, their very different perspective, had forced changes that might otherwise have taken generations. The emergency alert sounded differently now, a low, steady tone rather than the jarring alarm it had once been. Neither man flinched at the sound. They had been expecting it. "Long-range scouts have confirmed," reported the duty officer. "The Void Collective main fleet has entered the outer system. 87 vessels identified so far." This would be the decisive battle, one they had been preparing for since the Indomitable's arrival. The first encounters had been merely probing attacks. This was the true invasion force. "Inform all commands," Park ordered calmly. "Launch Sequence Alpha." Throughout the Concordat, the response began. Ships that had been on standby moved into formation. Planetary defenses activated. Civilian populations headed to shelters that hadn't existed 6 months earlier. From his position in the new combined command center, Ta-1 watched the largest fleet in Concordat history assemble. 234 vessels gathered at the designated rally points. Most were converted Concordat ships, but they had been joined by 47 newly arrived human warships. The humans had been sending reinforcements steadily since the Indomitable's arrival, each ship bringing specialists and technology. Earth, it seemed, had committed fully to this distant war. The combined fleet moved to meet the enemy. It was a sight never before witnessed in Concordat history. 17 species fighting alongside humans, united against extinction. They're following the strategy, Ta-1 observed as the fleet split into the planned formation. 3 months of simulations and planning exercises have prepared for this moment. So far, Park replied. But plans rarely survive first contact. What matters is that the commanders understand the principles behind the strategy, not just the movements. The battle began at the edge of the solar system and moved inward over 3 days. The void ships were relentless, adaptable. They learned quickly, adjusting to tactics that initially succeeded against them. But so did the humans, and now so did the Concordat. From the command center, Ta-1 and Park coordinated the defense. Sleep came in brief stretches. Meals were forgotten. Reports of ships lost and crews killed came steadily, each one noted and mourned briefly before attention returned to the ongoing fight. On the 3rd day, the tide turned. A weakness in the Void Collective's formation, created by an especially daring maneuver by a mixed human Concordat attack group, was exploited ruthlessly. For the first time, the Void ships began to retreat in disarray rather than in their usual perfect coordination. "They're breaking formation," Park said, a hint of surprise in his tired voice. "Their command structure is compromised." In the hours that followed, the combined fleet pressed their advantage. The remaining Void ships retreated into deep space, jumping beyond sensor range. Victory had come at immense cost. 83 ships destroyed. Over 30,000 dead from all species involved. But the Concordat had survived its first true war in centuries. 1 year later, Ta-1 stood on Earth's soil, breathing its heavier air and adjusting to its stronger gravity. Around him, human architecture soared, buildings showing both the scars of their previous war and the remarkable reconstruction that followed. The treaty signing ceremony took place in a structure that symbolized humanity's resilience. Once a government building destroyed in the First Void War, it had been rebuilt with parts of the original structure deliberately left damaged and exposed, incorporated into the new design as a reminder. Representatives from all Concordat worlds had journeyed to Earth for this historic moment. The alliance was being formalized, not just a wartime cooperation, but a true merging of civilizations. Captain Park, now Admiral Park, stood at the central podium. His prosthetic arm had been upgraded to a more advanced model, nearly indistinguishable from his natural limb, except for a slight metallic sheen. "Today marks not an end, but a beginning," Park said, his voice carrying through the great hall. "The threat remains, though diminished. The Void Collective will return, but next time, they will find us stronger, more united." He activated a holographic display, showing the design for a new class of vessels, sleek ships combining elements of both human and Concordat technology. "We build these together," Park announced, "not because we wish for war, but because we value peace enough to defend it. These vessels carry the best of both our civilizations, exploration and defense, science and security, diplomacy and strength." The first such ship would launch within months, crewed by humans and all 17 Concordat species. It would carry scientists and soldiers, diplomats and engineers, a true representation of what they were becoming together. Later, at the reception following the ceremony, Ta-1 found a quiet moment with Park on a balcony overlooking the rebuilt human city. "Did you imagine this outcome when the Indomitable first appeared in our space?" Ta-1 asked. Park considered the question. "I hoped," he said finally. When we detected the Void Collective's movements toward your region, we feared we might find only another devastated civilization. Instead, we found allies who helped us finally turn the tide. Taiwan watched the city lights below, thinking of how much had changed. The Concordat had been transformed, not just its defenses and technologies, but its very understanding of its place in the universe. They had discovered strength they never knew they possessed. Everything changes now, Taiwan said, echoing his first thought upon seeing the Indomitable. Yes, Park agreed, but perhaps for the better. In the sky above, new stars moved, ships in orbit, some bearing the marks of battle, others freshly constructed. Together, they formed a protective network around a planet that had nearly fallen, now the center of a new alliance that spanned two civilizations. The universe had proven more dangerous than the Concordat had believed, but they were no longer facing that danger alone.